What starts here changes the world. I have a few suggestions that may help you on your way to a better world. And while these lessons were learned during my time in the military, I can assure you that it matters not whether you ever served a day in uniform. It matters not your gender, your ethnic or religious background, your orientation, or your social status. Our struggles in this world are similar, and the lessons to overcome those struggles and to move forward, changing ourselves and changing the world around us, will apply equally to all. So here are the 10 lessons I learned from basic SEAL training that hopefully will be of value to you as you move forward in life. Every morning in SEAL training, my instructors, who at the time were all Vietnam veterans, would show up in my barracks room, and the first thing they'd do was inspect my bed. If you did it right, the corners would be square, the covers would be pulled tight, the pillow centered just under the headboard, and the extra blanket folded neatly at the foot of the rack. It was a simple task, mundane at best, but every morning we were required to make our bed to perfection. It seemed a little ridiculous at the time, particularly in light of the fact that we were aspiring to be real warriors, tough, battle-hardened SEALs. But the wisdom of this simple act has been proven to me many times over. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better. So if you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. During SEAL training, the students are all broken down into boat crews. Each crew is 7 students, 3 on each side of a small rubber boat, and 1 coxswain to help guide the dinghy. Every day your boat crew forms up on the beach and is instructed to get through the surf zone and paddle several miles down the coast. In the winter, the surf off San Diego can get to be 8 to 10 feet high, and it is exceedingly difficult to paddle through the plunging surf unless everyone digs in. Every paddle must be synchronized to the stroke count of the coxswain. Everyone must exert equal effort, or the boat will turn against the wave and be unceremoniously dumped back on the beach. For the boat to make it to its destination, everyone must paddle. You can't change the world alone. You will need some help. And to truly get from your starting point to your destination takes friends, colleagues, the goodwill of strangers, and a strong coxswain to guide you. If you want to change the world, find someone to help you paddle. Over a few weeks of difficult training, my SEAL class, which started with 150 men, was down to just 42. There were now 6 boat crews of 7 men each. I was in the boat with the tall guys, but the best boat crew we had was made up of the little guys, the Munchkin crew, we called them. No one was over 5'5". The Munchkin boat crew had 1 American Indian, 1 African American, 1 Polish American, 1 Greek American, 1 Italian American, and 2 tough kids from the Midwest. They out-paddled, outran, and outswam all the other boat crews. The big men in the other boat crews would always make good-natured fun of the tiny little flippers the Munchkins put on their tiny little feet prior to every swim. But somehow these little guys from every corner of the nation and the world always had the last laugh, swimming faster than everyone and reaching the shore long before the rest of us. SEAL training was a great equalizer. Nothing mattered but your will to succeed, not your color, not your ethnic background, not your education, not your social status. If you want to change the world, measure a person by the size of their heart, not by the size of their flippers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Karis Project podcast. Today, we're going to have a panel discussing some of this madness going on in Canada with the One BC party, we've got Chris Enns, and he was a former PPC candidate, and Peyman Askari, who was also a former PPC candidate. So, yeah, you guys want to just kind of reintroduce yourselves quickly?
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure, yeah, I'm Chris Enns. I was PPC candidate for Kamloops Smith Thompson Nicola in the last election. I'm still affiliated with the party, but we don't know when the next election is. And at the moment, BC provincial politics is the place to be for anything interesting.
Yes. Go ahead, Peyman.
Yeah, my name is Peyman Askari. I've been in Canada since 1989. COVID kind of woke me up. I tried everything I could to save the country, which resulted in finally me running for the People's Party, which made me realize just how much of a mess we have on our hands and how difficult it really is. And I always said after the April election, people gave up on the Conservative Party. They put their faith in Daniel Smith. And then they gave up on Daniel Smith and they put their faith in Dallas Brody. And then just yesterday we saw that what I'm calling this a coup. They basically couped her out of her own party.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. When I look at what happened there, someone's got feedback. Who's got an open mic? I can hear
Could
feedback.
be me. Let's see if I can try to mute it.
I'll mute when I'm not talking.
There we go. That's the feedback. Yeah, so when I looked at what happened, it does seem like a straight up takedown the way that it was done. It doesn't look like, I just see that things went wrong, put it that way. Thoughts on that?
How do you want to do it, Chris? You want me to go first always, or you?
Why don't you go first and then I'll chime in after?
Sure, we'll go with that order. Yeah, I saw this yesterday, and I actually put out a post this morning. I think Dallas Brody is just too much of a threat. She speaks the truth. I mean, I consider her a populist, but even if you don't, she goes against the narrative, and she's uncancelable because she's in the legislature, which is a real threat. And I just before going live, I was talking to somebody in my DMs, and they said, I think they realized that she can't be controlled. So they basically said, we have to get rid of her, and we have to do to One BC what we did to the BC Conservative Party before with Rustad. They just can't have any institution that they don't completely control, which is why I'm so angry, because I'm the exact opposite of that. I'm a populist.
That's exactly it. They can't control. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think it comes down to those with principles and those who wish for power. And the way that I've seen this unfold over the past 24 hours, and especially the responses now in the last hour or so from Dallas Brody, she's definitely sticking to her line of the integrity. She's getting all sorts of wild accusations of security breaches and trying to steal databases and things like that. It just doesn't add up for me. If it was my party, and we can dig in, maybe you guys know a little bit more about the beginning of One BC and who joined in what order, because I think that matters. I'd be trying my darndest to save the party from people who are trying to do a forced takeover, as you already mentioned, Peyman.
Yeah, do you know anything about that, Peyman? Since you're the BC resident.
I don't really have any insider information, but I talked to one guy who's heavily involved with politics in BC, much more so than I am, and he's the one that originally used the word coup that I ended up using. And he said this is definitely a coup. He was talking about Aaron Gunn. This is all his fingerprints. It just happens to be a coincidence that he says he might want to come back to BC at approximately the same time. I don't really buy it. The other thing is I think they wanted to, or I'll let Chris speak to this, but the possibility of them, soaking up some of the BC Conservative Party MLAs or merging back into the fold of the BC Conservative Party. And I think Chris is like 100% correct. It's Dallas Brody, she stood on principle. It wasn't about power with her, which again makes her really dangerous.
Yes. Let's look at Let's just look at the this letter that you saw here. After she had made the public announcement that she had removed some people, and then this letter comes out with what at least one of the people, isn't Tim one of the people that she removed, coming on to sign to say that they're going to remove her as the leader. Thoughts on this?
Well, it doesn't seem very legal to me. Like, how can you go in the middle of this kind of situation and start drafting constitutional changes where you require 50% of the MLAs when one of them is an MLA? It just seems dodgy. And I'm not sure, maybe you guys can speak to the legality, but from an ethics point of view, I don't see why anyone would buy this.
Well, how do you actually pull this off after you were fired? Right? If the leader fires you, how do you get to sign on if you're fired?
Man, you make a good point, and I didn't even think of that. But I was going to say Tim and Paul, the two individuals that Dallas fired, are exactly the same ones that turned around and got her fired, which is a conflict. Probably legally, what happened is she fired them in their administrative capacity, but those two are still on the board. Like, she can't fire people from the board. So it was a bit of a miscalculation on her part. Maybe she felt more secure than she was. But this whole thing stinks. Like, the way that Tara Armstrong has bungled this, whoever put this idea in her mind, this bug in her ear, we're going to get rid of Dallas Brody and it's going to be a cakewalk. So they come out and they first say, oh, she was firing people left, right, and center. That didn't really stick. Oh, she was stealing personal data. That didn't really stick. And now they're saying that she's like mentally unfit. And people, they might not be deep thinkers, but they sense it when the argument starts changing. They're like, wait a minute, something's off here.
Yeah, let's actually bring up that post here. Let me get it up here that you were talking about when we were looking at some of what was happening, where you're saying that they were saying she was mentally unstable, which is what they try to pull up here. Please. Oh, is that the right thing? Oh, that's not it. It was here. Yeah, they actually that was something that they put it on this one. I'll have to just switch it over to this 1 second here. They actually that doesn't fly with what they did here. Let me get this changed here.
While you're looking at that, a lot of this came up from, I think it was a 22-year-old staffer, whose name I won't be able to pronounce correctly because I don't have it in front of me, who kept berating Dallas about wanting to post something. I guess this person was in charge of the social media accounts, and she said, no, I'm not doing that, and pushed her to the point where she, raised her voice, to quote Wyatt Claypool, and yelled at the staffer or whatever, to quote the other side of the situation. I mean, if you're a staffer or anyone who's managing a social media account for a corporation or whoever, you can't just write whatever you want. If they don't give their consent, then it's not on. So I don't even see how you would keep pushing, and then you would back that person as well. I mean, there's so many red flags about that for that individual, who I also heard had been fired from a federal MP's campaign for other transgressions. So it just doesn't make sense why they would protect this individual to such an extent, unless this was like a controlled demolition of some sort.
Yes, because we're looking at this here when they're talking about the guy's name was Othman McLuffy. I hope I'm saying that right. That this is the person that was in question, that they said they had values that they weren't in alignment with. So there's some stuff that's been swirling around on social media, but that hasn't been confirmed. I mean, but then you had Tim Thielman that came in there that straight up just says your statement is false and defamatory, as well as an exhibition of extremely poor judgment for an MLA to malign multiple staff members. And then Paul Ratchford comes in with that statement, which comes in, and it just says that they ratified a special resolution removing her as the leader of 1BC and so forth, and then put Tara Armstrong up there. And this is what they did here. So they went ahead, they got fired, and then this was nothing but straight up retaliation, right? No other word for it. And so after that was there, they just decided to do a back end deal and take her out. Thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree with you. What I was thinking, so Chris mentioned that individual who wanted to put out a post, which she disagreed with. The one vector of attack that they're using right now to sow division is Zionism. So they're saying that Dallas Brody is a Zionist. And I don't support Zionism myself, but I just don't see it. And I don't think that's our main issue. Our main issue right now is globalism, which is loosely what Dallas Brody is fighting. But what they're like, just before coming on here, I saw this one woman who supported Dallas Brody. She's getting into a fight with a bot. I didn't have time. I had to jump on. I didn't have time to tell her. I'm like, you realize that's a bot. It's got like 30 followers, but the bot was coming out and saying, yeah, Dallas Brody is a Zionist and she supports Zionism. So that's one of the ways that they're trying to make it difficult for us to discuss this.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that, unfortunately, Wyatt Claypool, who replaced Tim Thielman as chief of staff, in his ex-bio says Zionist and neocon, right? And I mean, he's 26 years old, I believe. I think, to a certain extent, I think he's maybe just being edgy. I'm not sure. I've watched his YouTube channel for a year, and I mean, he doesn't come across as particularly Zionistic or neocon. I mean, but anybody can hold whatever ideas in their head, and they're not necessarily shared on their channel, so it is what it is. But 1BC had Wyatt Claypool on staff for quite a long time, right? It's only recently that this vector of attack has been utilized against the party, and it's kind of within this last 3-week period. And I said this to you guys off air, but I'll say it again now because I think it's relevant, in that we've almost got this 3 stages in the last 3 weeks of how the party has kind of, it was really growing, and then it looked like maybe the party could have taken MLAs from the BC Conservatives. And then the BC Conservatives staged their own coup, right? And then it looked like maybe they were even in talks with some BC Conservatives, from what I've heard through my DMs. And it seemed like, well, maybe the BC Conservatives are trying to steal 1BC people, and they're both trying to poach each other at the same time. And eventually one side decided to cave, seemingly the 1BC side, and the people who are more big tent conservative, as opposed to, no, we're sticking to our guns, they said, well, we're going to implode the party in order to achieve our greater ends. That's the only narrative that I can see at this point that makes any real sense.
Well, the fact that you talked about the Zionism and with Wyatt Claypool, the Christians, Protestants, are generally supportive of Israel, whether they be Zionist or not. And even if they're not, they don't believe in racism, right? Because a lot of them are just like, well, there's a handful of criminal Jews, so all Jews are bad, right? Like, this is the mentality. And so people, because of this is what they're going to use and slander them as, because they're saying, well, these Jews are criminals. I'm like, okay, that's great. They're criminals. So what? That means they're criminals like all the other criminals that are sitting inside of every government household that are not Jews, right? Like, so you got a bunch of criminals working together that are trying to bend over the entire world. Great. All right. Why are you going to write off an entire race of people because of like a small percentage of them, a minuscule percentage of them doing something very wrong, right? This is really what it boils down to. And so this is a way they're using to attack it. Go ahead.
I didn't mean to derail the conversation and make it about Zionism. I going back to what Chris said, I think Chris is interpretation of what's going on is very accurate, and it makes sense to me. The I just phrase it differently. Like I say, Dallas Brody, she stands on principle. She knows what she believes in, and she's not, she's not stepping back on that. She's not ashamed of what she believes in. The other ones, specifically Tara Armstrong. I mean, if she was a liberal, I'd say she's a limousine liberal, but she's a conservative. So I don't know. She's a conservative in name only. Like these people, it's the same thing we saw with the Conservative Party, the BC Conservative Party, when the BC United imploded, and they just started picking up these candidates. And I'm just like, wait a minute, well, you're just letting everybody in? Like, don't you have some sort of like a vetting process? But apparently, with Tara Armstrong, Paul, and Tim, they're fully okay with merging or going over to the BC Conservative Party.
So they want to go back to the BC Conservative Party is really what the issue is.
Well, I mean, that's the way it looks. So it's hard to know for sure. I mean, at the moment, it looks like they have control of all the One BC party materials, right? As the directors who've managed to win the coup, they have control of all the assets. So whether they now go through the official demolition of the party and the official merger with the BC Conservatives remains to be seen.
Well, as it stands right now, unless they get other sitting MLAs to come in, they don't legally have a party because you need to have two MLAs to actually have a party. So now either they're going to merge with the Conservatives or they're going to destroy the party. Either way, the party goes away.
I don't think they care. Like I would, these people, they strike me as career politicians. Like what they care about is their salary. And you know what else bothers me? They made such a big deal about how Dallas Brody misappropriated taxpayer money for, took the donors' money for her own pet project. They're talking about the documentary. Well, this is a bigger betrayal of the funders of the party, the members that gave money because they believed in the party. And I don't, in my personal opinion, Dallas Brody is the party, not the board. And now they're just going to take that and merge it with the BC Conservative Party, or water it down, or shut it down. Like this is a bigger betrayal.
I agree. And I think this is one of the main lines of attack, especially from other conservatives on X, is that Dallas Brody, and they use her name specifically, they don't usually say One BC. They name and shame Dallas Brody. And they say she took caucus funds, right? So they're saying she took money from donors, but also that she's misappropriating funds. And this I also saw what Czech News have reported, that she was using money from the legislature for party stationery and other kind of office supplies, whatever, and used that to fund the documentary. So, I mean, it comes down to what is considered political activism, what's considered party assets. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as it's a factual, objective production and it benefits the population of BC and elsewhere, I'm not, it's better than all the other things that the government uses our tax dollars for. So I think that they're really splitting hairs on this issue, but that's just my opinion.
Now, just listening to this, like you're sitting down and saying that they're painting it as her. But Kim was the one who did the actual documentary. He's one of the board members. This would have something that would have had to come to the board to make a decision. It's not like she just took the money by herself and went ahead and gave it to some random person to make the documentary. The guy who made the documentary was actually on the board. So even if she did take the money unlawfully, he was on the board, which also makes him culpable, knowing full well if she didn't notify anybody, then they're both guilty. So how is it that it only becomes her? Like, this is where this is not, you're seeing these things that are not adding up with the way that this is coming out. And I want to know what's happening, because when I look at this, this is very problematic.
Dale,
That's
I think
why I
you're
say
thinking
this
too.
is really character assassination. It's not about the party. This is a character assassination hit job.
Yeah, you're right. It is character assassination. I didn't think of it that way. I was going to say that Dale is thinking too logically. I think they're dusting off. I'm not making fun of you, but they're dusting off the playbook they used against Stephen Malthouse, and it worked like a charm. They came out in one day. They attacked him viciously. John Rustad folded like a cheap suit, and they got him out. And they figured they could do the same thing. But I think the world has changed. COVID is in the rearview mirror. I think more people are more vocal about how COVID was a hoax, and they're more awake to the tactics that they're using. So the same tactics that crushed Stephen Malthouse, now people they're like, wait, this doesn't pass the smell test. And I didn't even consider what you said, Dale, because I just figured these people have zero integrity. But you're right. I mean, Tim is the one that made the documentary. This is bizarro world.
Well, this is the type of thing that I, unfortunately, I've had to deal with for years. Watching contradictory statements being put in by a bunch of people, but it was taken as truth. And I'm seeing the same pattern happen over and over again. And when you mentioned that she's going on principle, regardless of whether you agree with her or not, the fact that she's doing it out of principle rather than out of party politics, that means you're not going to change their mind because they're doing what they believe is right. And that makes them, as they say, difficult to deal with if you want to become a career politician, right? So, yeah, this is insane. I want to bring up a little clip here where they were talking about the media. So, this is the guys from Blender News.
And if I'm being perfectly honest, I think we have a one-party state. And I'll tell you why. There's three reasons. One is what I just explained, the censorship apparatus that's in place that's stopping free speech. Two is they control the media.
Yes, they do.
Right, so 85% of all mainstream media is subsidized by the government, 85%.
That's right.
I actually think about 50 to 60% of the independent media is also subsidized by the government. But what's interesting is 90% of all news consumed by a Canadian, and this is early 2025 numbers, and it was my math, 90% of all news consumed by a Canadian comes from a subsidized source, and immigration. They're flowing immigration here at a rapid rate. Now, when you put those tools together, you have a potent weapon to control the political landscape.
Iron hand control over everything that we consume.
That's exactly
it's
it.
Fucking insane.
Anybody?
Chris?
Yeah, well, we see, like I said before, you've got these people on the conservative side coming out and attacking, right? I mean, even they're jumping in calling Dallas Brody or one BC racist or talking about embezzling money and all of these claims, but they never substantiate their claims, right? It just requires a little bit of doubt to get people to go, oh no, I don't want to be associated with that. That's not right. That person might be compromised. But what they never consider is that the person who's telling them this stuff is the one who's more likely actually compromised, right? I saw the same thing, and the last time I spoke with Dale publicly was about the ostrich farm in Edgewood, right? The amount of character assassination that was going on and the amount of just little seeds of doubt, bringing things up from 30 years ago that, maybe one of the owners was involved in something that, was financially not great. But it's hard to actually then find any charges being laid, right? But it only requires accusations. And they've kind of worked out this formula that as long as they can just accuse people of something, they don't ever have to back it up because they will throw them off the trail, right? And they will prevent them from ever getting to their success, whatever it is, whether it's ostrich farm success, saving the birds, or it's Dallas Brody and her party and trying to deal with the Truth and Reconciliation and land grabbing nightmare that we find ourselves in today.
Well, and they also use people in certain positions and capacity because, well, you have the board throwing her out. Then it for some average person, it gives it some credibility because of the person standing. And people aren't looking into things very deeply. And so they're just like, oh, the board threw her out. She must be a criminal. Write it off. This is how a lot of people think. And this is why we're in the position that we're in, because the timing of doing this is critical, because there's a lot going on and they want to not have certain topics being discussed. You want to go ahead?
So Chris is right, and I agree with him. But Dale, what you said earlier, you said, like, why are they doing this? It's almost like they're just like sleepwalking through this. It's very lazy. But I was on a space, and somebody came on and they said, if Dallas Brody misappropriated the funds, then yes, I agree, she should leave. This is inappropriate. And the space host was very courageous, and he held him accountable. And he goes, what exactly did she misappropriate it from? And then he starts backing up. He's like, well, I don't really know, but there was that documentary. And he's like, yeah, but don't you think a documentary is a valid use of funds? Because if the membership wants it. So the space host, he kind of brought him back. But the point is, you hear this, the majority of people, they'll just hear this, Dallas Brody misappropriated funds, and they just assume it's true. And they thought that they could get away with it. They're not getting away with it as easily as with Stephen Malthouse, but it still has an impact.
Well, yes, and they're not looking at the fact that one of the board members who would have been part of that misappropriation of funds is one of the ones that are removing her and slandering her about the same thing. So, like, it is exactly what Chris is saying: character assassination in a specific and deliberate manner. And I just wanted to look at, because when you're looking at the online or not the online harms, but the Bill C9 and so forth, and about the hate speech, well, let's listen to this clip here and see what people are, how this kind of factors into this.
Residential school denialism a hate crime? First Nations leaders say it is.
By criminalizing residential school denialism, Canada would be taking a step toward fulfilling its international human rights obligations.
The Assembly of First Nations is calling on Canada to classify residential school denialism as hate speech, an issue they say is on the rise.
In BC, we witnessed the creation of a new political party, the One BC, whose central focus is to spread division, hate, and anti-Indigenous rhetoric against Indigenous people.
The party has made a film that calls residential school harms into question.
What was the budget for the documentary in terms of taxpayer dollars?
That's private information.
It was taxpayer funded.
We use caucus funds because it's an educational documentary.
One BC held an unsanctioned event at University of Victoria.
The residential school deniers are being escorted out.
Hundreds of people showed up in response. While mainly peaceful, some tension spilled over.
It was incredible. We outshone them, we outnumbered them, we outloved them, we outhated them, we out-everythinged them.
One of the things that they often say is zero bodies. When we know from both government and church records, we know from family recollections, from the testimony of survivors. So this whole notion that there are no bodies is a complete red herring.
Planned Speaker Frances Widdowson was arrested for trespassing. Here she is speaking at a City of Quesnel meeting in BC last year.
There is no evidence of unmarked graves at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. So do you agree that Mrs.
One BC also held an unsanctioned event in Kamloops with Widdowson at Thompson Rivers University in November. The party says it will continue to hold debates online and at university campuses.
At residential schools, though, do you believe students died and were harmed?
Well, I think what we're saying here is that children did die, and children died at my school when I grew up. And so, yes, there were disease and there were lots of things that happened at the schools, but it wasn't that the whole thing was this mendacious plan to kill children.
Canada must take action to ensure that this racist rhetoric doesn't spread or go unchallenged.
I
just want to say something here. That Bill C9 comes in, they're going to throw this woman under the bus, 100%. Secondly, the government. when was the government ever honest? I can't remember. So you're going to have a fight over something that the government told you. Both sides should be like, listen, you lie through your teeth. You screw us over all of the time. We want to find out what actually happened. I'm not going to sit down and say one way or the other, because anytime you take children away from parents, bad things happen. We know this. This is just the way it is. But we want to know what the truth of the matter is, not what the government tells us and then creates a fight for us to be at each other's throats. It's not what we want, right? So this needs to be dealt with.
I guess I'll go first, Chris. The government, I don't even see it as left and right anymore. The government, they set the narrative through the media, which is what this, it's very polished the way that they present these things. Those First Nations get up there and they say, the rhetoric, as you call it, it's this hate speech. And then the government, I am convinced that they are also from the other end, they're attacking people like the three of us through bots, spreading, division through things like Zionism, accusations of Zionism, or calling me anti-Semitic, or coming in and attacking on the ostrich farm, for example, Chris, when they attacked the farm owners. So to tie it back to that gentleman, the podcast you played, I think we do have a uniparty. Like it's a state. I don't even see it as liberal versus conservative.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, that video was just pure propaganda, right? I mean, I wish we had a law against denying of objectivity, right? Like, we just start there. We just deal with objective facts and then work our way back from where the meaning comes out of all of that. I mean, this all comes out of postmodern subjectivity. However I feel is what is true. And if I can then turn that into law, then I've got you, nail in the coffin. It's madness. And I think the general public, most of us still grew up in a meritocracy. Although over my lifetime, I'm 38, I've seen that dwindle over the past 30 years. It's like, what meritocracy? Who gets jobs based on merit anymore? It's all DEI, right? So that is the problem here. And unfortunately, I mean, that is one of the most edited clips. I mean, I don't really watch leftist TV or leftist social media. I'm just like, wow, like, give me the unedited version of that, and then we can compare them side by side and give the audience a real take.
Yeah, but I think that what they're doing here, it's done with intent to divide, right? This is the whole point. They know that this is a very sensitive subject, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this a little bit further on, because the government is very much to blame for this, and a handful of people in the government that were continuing to do this and try to make it sound nice to screw everybody over, because the government created the circumstances for this fight, and people need to stop defending the government. This, like, when I see people talking, I'm like, okay, you can talk about the average Canadian, sure, fine, I'm good with that, but the government was the guys in the British Crown who were like bought and paid for by the king, did not want any freedom for the average person. They looked at us as the enemy. It didn't matter what color you were. If you wanted freedom, they wanted you to bend over to the king, or they were on the take, whatever the case may be. They were bending us over from the beginning. And how they set up the natives, they set them up for failure. They put communism, the reserves are communist, and they want to bring it to a neighborhood near you. This is a lot about what this is about, because they want us to all get bent over. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's just like the difficulty is, how do you go to the average person and convince them of this thing? The average person doesn't know what the Crown Corporation is. The average person just thinks saying anything about First Nations is racist, and they have no idea what's going on the reserves. They just know that if you say something negative about it, that makes you a racist. And it's very difficult to break out of this. The only silver lining I see is with this Cowichan land ruling out of Richmond, BC. Some people have started to wake up, and it's almost like you can use the threat of expropriation as a reason to convince people that we need to radically change our form of government.
Yeah, I mean, it's really snowballed as well. Cowichan claim was the first catalyst. I mean, it came back to the Haida-Gwaii land agreement that happened a few years ago, and then now Cowichan, and now Port Coquitlam and Kamloops. And I heard rumors of another one, but I can't say it off the top of my head. So it's kind of happening everywhere, right? And you've got a BC court that kind of thinks, oh, title can it coexist. It's like, well, only one person can have title. Now, the other day, New Brunswick Court of Appeal struck this down and said, no, you can't go after fee simple private property. They said you can maybe go after Crown land, so it's not a total win for the public, but it's better than nothing. This is going to be caught up in the courts for a long time. But I think so much of this comes... You go ahead before I go on a tangent.
Okay, I'm just going to say this right now. Like, first of all, whenever you hear Aboriginal title, you think of Crown title. Because the number treaties, first of all, the way that Canada did things completely wrong. Because the number treaties after Confederation are completely different than the treaties that existed beforehand. The Indian Act should not even apply to anybody except for the number treaties. The number treaties were done very differently. So when you hear the term Aboriginal title, the Crown is the one who actually controls the land. The natives don't own the land. They say this is designated, we're giving you this, but you don't actually own it. None of the indigenous own the land. This is communism, straight up. So they have no incentive, right? Then you go back to the Manitoba Act, and this was where war came out. The Manitoba Act, they gave the Métis river lots, like land scripts. Some of it, they were already living there because this was their way of life on those waterways for the fur trade. They were all across Rupert's Land and so forth. So they got a bunch of the Métis that were in the United States, and most of them were American because their birth records or their baptismal records were in the United States because Rupert's Land was the Wild Wild West. So they renounce their American ties to get land from the Crown. Guess what? They create the Indian Act and say, too bad, you don't get nothing, too bad, even though it was in the Constitution Act to have constitutionally protected land. The reason why they didn't want this was because they had individual land rights, property owners. The biggest threat to a tyrannical government is property owners. Go back and look at the history. The landowners were barons and so forth in the UK. The king stepped to the line, we're like, too bad, we're going to replace you, right? Because they're not dependent on the state. They can produce what they need if you have property. And this is why they didn't want them having property, and you lose the incentive to go ahead and do things because then you can have generational wealth and so forth. So this is why they didn't get anything. And then the Métis were uniting people, and if they had to give the other tribes individual land rights, we wouldn't be having this problem that we're having today. So they swept that under the rug and said, now we're going to go ahead later on to use this indigenous title nonsense. First of all, there's no treaties in most of the places in BC, and the ones that were pre-Confederation, too bad. They don't have a constitutional leg to stand on. Well, you have the Supreme Court that's ruling by decree and lawyers that are following this nonsense, and they need people say enough's enough because what they're doing is stealing your land, because that stuff that went over to the natives, it's not the natives that are going to do anything because who's going to enforce it? It's the government. The federal government is going to start kicking people off, and this is how you're going to own nothing and be happy, right? Did it work for the reserves? No.
I'll just quickly add something, and then Chris, you can continue. I'm not really well informed on this stuff like you are, Dale, but I'm just making the observation that the Indigenous and the non-Indigenous Canadians, they're arriving at the same destination where neither of us really have property rights. I mean, they're taking away our property as well.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose BC is a real aberration. I mean, a lot of Quebec and Atlantic Canada is in a similar boat where there's no treaties there as well, because the relationship between the French settlers and the Indigenous in that part of the country was based on a totally different relationship than this English common law, let's make treaties, do all these kinds of things, right? I mean, the Royal Proclamation of, I believe, 1763, everything west of the Appalachians is all Indian land, and to use a direct quote from it. It's like, well, that's a massive problem because, you know, everything that comes after that, they included that in the Constitution of 1982 as a, you know, a core document to be sourced as, you know, case law. Like, it's all a giant mess. In British Columbia, one of the reasons why there was no treaties, I'm sure there's multiple, is that it was a rush job. Because of the gold rush, there was so many of these Americans who'd come up to British Columbia, and the population was exponentially increased almost overnight. And the people who were here, the government officials, they did not want what happened in California in 1849 when the 49ers came over and they committed an actual genocide of Native Californians, right? We're talking 100,000 dead, right? Truly gruesome. And this is another one of the reasons why they created reserves. Say what you want, you know, and a lot of people do about Canada's founding fathers, and I'm not here to defend anyone, or the government especially, but given the context of the times, they invented the reserve system as a way to protect the local Indigenous against the excesses that they saw happening south of the border, right? And a lot of these guys had come from the, you know, they were staunch abolitionists, they were anti-slavery, they were for a certain level of equality. Of course they had their vices, right? And they were products of their own times. Did they still think that their civilization was superior? Absolutely they did. But did they have a certain amount of ethic about a value of human life and that it should be spared? That can also be true at the same time. And so that's the historical context that kids are supposed to learn in high school social studies class. And it kind of disappeared out the window. And now I don't even know if they teach it at all. Instead, you know, you've got kids watching that that clip that you just shared.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, yeah, vices. They had vices. Like Confederation was started. It was founded over a lot of booze and a lot of women, right? Like basically, Johnny McDonald, I think it was like $20,000 or $30,000 worth of booze and pretty much locked everybody in until they signed. Like they partied and got destroyed, and that's how Canada started. Just FYI.
So would you say they partied like it was 1867?
Something like that. Yeah, but at the end of the day, the way forward, and BC's actually in a good position to do this because the Constitution, they might sit down and say what they want, but the 1867 Act actually lays out the structure of the government in Canada and separates provincial and federal powers, right? They can't do that. First of all, the land in each province is under the control of the province. The federal government can only deal with territories. That is it, because they don't have a fully formed government, so they are more dependent on the federal government to do so. This is how they were able to form the Northwest Mounted Police to go in and deal with the Northwest Territories, with the whole thing with the Métis and so forth. But for provinces, absolutely not. So when the government courts are going out and giving out land to the natives, which is really giving the land to the federal government, they've just overstepped their boundaries, right? Because I was talking to a lawyer, and he actually said that it doesn't matter about the 1867 portion of the Constitution. I was like, excuse me? He's like, well, Section 35 and then the Supreme Court case law. I was like, I don't give a damn what the case law says, because the case law is in the Constitution. Constitution overrides case law, and if you have Section 35, you haven't repealed Section 92 that deals with the provincial property rights, so you have to interpret Section 35 in light of Section 92, which lays out the provincial powers. That means that anything that they had previously exclusive control over, that means you cannot touch. And this is the problem that we're seeing, is that they're disregarding the Constitution whenever they please, and a country cannot function like that, because a constitution has to stay static. It's like a building or a machine that has intricately moving and machined parts. If you stuck a gear in that was like, a quarter inch, which is huge difference, then into a place where it has a clearance of a few thousandths of an inch, that thing's never going to work. Well, this is what we're watching in our Constitution. You disregard it, and it doesn't work. And this is what's happening. But the province to go to the natives and say, "Hey, I'll give you property rights. I'll give you individual property rights, and whatever everybody wants to do that, give mineral rights to them and everybody else, and we're going to give everybody a benefit."
Are they even offering them individual property rights? I mean,
no.
That doesn't. No, exactly, they're not. Right. I mean, that's the People's Party want to give Indigenous individual property rights, and ideally get rid of the Indian Act, demolish the reserve system, all that great stuff. Right. They don't want that. I mean, and a lot of them, they just kind of vote according to, we'll just vote for the same chief. These are effectively petty little principalities, right? This is like the Holy Roman Empire. You've got all of these little princedoms running around, and then you've got Imperial Ottawa kind of telling them what to do. And they're all grasping for the same crumbs from the table. And, it's a great way to control things because you only now have to deal with a few chiefs, and they haven't, none of them have, well, maybe not none of them, but a lot of them haven't submitted their expenditure forms that they're supposed to, according to an act that was put in under Harper. And they've kind of disregarded it since the Liberals took over. And no one really knows what the spending is. And none of the money trickles down to the average band member. But meanwhile, the chiefs are living large.
Like when you said that the People's Party of Canada wanted to give the natives individual land rights, that's why they went after them more than anything else. Because the Indigenous are being used to take all of our land. This is why they're doing this. This is why they're using it. This is why they tried to write in things into the Constitution that would override what was done, but they can't do that. And at the time they couldn't do it, but it was later on, and they waited and waited and waited, and nobody really talked about this kind of stuff anymore. And then they just had the Supreme Court that was creating this case law, and they're making it, they use what they call the living tree doctrine, which is just nonsense because they're basically ruling by decree, and you see them do all of these mental gymnastics. And they produce stuff, and when you read court documents, it looks a lot like what we were watching with what that letter that was talking about what was going on with Dallas Brody. A lot of this mental gymnastics and contradictory nonsense because they just have to pull whatever they need to justify what they're doing. And you give people property rights and they have incentive because now they have personal benefit from it. Because you will shatter the power of the chiefs if you have a bunch of landowners. They're like, well, I don't need you. Come build a pipeline through my land. And I get a bunch of people that do that. Can the chiefs tell them no? No, because they're the property owners. Too bad for you, right? This is why they don't want it.
Dale, you're talking about the chief, and the chief decides what goes to their property or not. I mean, for the average Canadian, that's like the municipality. It's the regulations. The regulations are telling you what can go through the property or not. I like what you're saying. The challenge is the people are just so politically illiterate. They've been so, uneducated for at least one generation, definitely since my generation. And how do you break through to them? So when I was at the PPC, you go to them and you say, we want like mixed healthcare. We want to break up the Indian Act. Take the Indian Act. If you say we want to break up the Indian Act, they'll be like, oh, thanks. Give me your flyer. I'd piss off, like they don't even know what it is. Which goes back to what we were talking about Dallas Brody. Like the threat with Dallas Brody, yeah, she stands on principle, but in a way, she's educating the public. She's giving a voice to people like the three of us who want to get these issues in front of the people. And I guess that's why they had to take her out. Like she was a really good force of education.
And like you said, the people they're not that educated. We've been programmed to just like use stuff like this, right? And spend all their time on that and waste it, right? So you have to give them something that's going to matter to them. And this is really what the issue is, because they have to fix the issue. They're not going to, like, constitutional challenge is never going to happen when you look at what happened with Beach Lake and Charlottetown and Court. And our country was in a far better state then than it is now. Like, we have to put the fires out first. And one of the things is to stop them from stealing the land, because with what they're doing through the courts, and the judges are appointed by the federal government, right? This is one of the biggest issues that the Americans had when they had the Revolutionary War, that the judges were dependent on the king's will, and that they ruled always in favor of the king because they were on the take. We're seeing the same thing happen here. Sorry, go ahead. I can go on for hours. Go ahead.
I kind of forgot what I was going to say, but I mean, you make a good point. Canadians are so pliable, and I said this to someone the other day, like, most Canadians are so used to getting their benefits from the government. Right? It's like, oh, well, I got to have my free this, my free that. Everybody is sucking from the teeth of the government at all times to varying degrees. And our only lens into the rest of the world is what's going on in America, right? And so the classic retort is, well, look, I don't want American-style healthcare. And I'm like, well, I lived in Australia for a decade. Why don't you go look at what they're doing over there? They've got a mixed healthcare system, and it works really, really well. They've got more CAT scan machines per capita than you could dream of, right? But like, it's a false narrative. It's a false binary. The good thing that Americans have is that they have their Constitution, and children are demanded to learn their Constitution, know your rights, right? Canadians don't know what their rights are. I mean, maybe we don't really have any. Maybe that's the takeaway from this conversation. We don't really have any rights. And I don't know how we fix that, because our education system has been taken over by total Marxists, and most people don't have the means to homeschool their children, whether financially or have the intellectual background to dig in the right places to be able to parse fact from fiction.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull something up here because I want people to see this, because people have an idea of what's, you say all this stuff, but people want to see it in practice, and this is what ends up happening here in practice. And I'll bring up on my situation here how the government steals your property, right? So let me just pull this up here. So this is my title here for my house, right? You can see that my name is on there, right? Then you see this is the contract. Okay, you see ex-wife's name and so forth. But then you go down to the signature. I'll just zoom that in so people can see. Right? There's where that was supposed to be there. You see there where my name is? Is that my name? There? No. Right? This is what was submitted to a court in order to sell my property. And you can see it happen here again. Right? This is what happens. And this is what courts are doing, right? Maybe not this blatant, but this essentially is what they're doing to everybody. When you're looking at these land deals, and they're covering, this is why they don't want it they covered up, because people are seeing fraud. And then the court then goes ahead and writes an order under a different act. Instead of the Family Property Act, they use the Land Titles Act, which is not lawful, to cover up a fraudulent and forged sale. That's money laundering. So you have that in the courts going on for years. This is not, I'm not the only person that this happened to. Go ahead.
Can you explain in the signatures exactly what is incorrect about the signature? Like, is that just a forgery, or is it the solicitor's number in the stamp? Like, what's exactly the issue? Because I'm not quite seeing it.
Okay, I'll explain it to you. Okay, you see where there's a signature that says K. Richardson twice, right? The name says Dale J. Richardson. That's me. I'm not Kim Richardson. I'm Dale Richardson. You can't put your signature to affix for me to sell something in my name. And then you see that she was listed here as a buyer. I was listed as seller in care of, but then she crosses it out and then both of her names are fixed there. That's forgery. You can't do that. That's fraud. This is crime. 100%. I can't go and sign my name on your house to sell your house. Right? That's essentially what happened.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So there's clearly something else going on there that I wasn't privy to in terms of your own background.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the details of that case either. I was just, as you were explaining that, I was thinking the whole purpose of the title office. So I own a car. Chris owns a car. Everyone in the community knows, that's Chris's car. This is my car. And nobody steals it. If someone steals it, you get a witness. You say, yeah, that's Peyman's car. I remember that dent. We were drunk and we hit a fire hydrant. But now the government comes in and they're like, we need a title and office for everything, and a car is registered and a house has a title. But if the government can come in and just steal, basically, I always say the government, what they want in the end is a monopoly on crime. So they don't want me to go steal Dale's house, but the government can come and steal Dale's house. And they don't call it theft. They just call it expropriation or property tax or seizure.
This is where I'll show you there, right there, where they take this and there you go. But guess what's missing? The court seal, right? There should be a seal there, but they still go ahead. This was submitted to the Land Titles Act, and I actually went ahead and talked to them. They got me to talk to their lawyer, and they blocked it. And every time I tried to do something to get it, they blocked it, and they punished me further. So they had people that were inside. Saskatchewan is the absolute hardest province in this country to do this. The only how they were able to do this is that they had the registrar of land titles, which is a government official, involved in this. Because Saskatchewan guarantees your title. The province does, in a way that no one else does. So, like, the fact that they did this here and they're getting away with it, this is why they're doing it to people everywhere else. And in principle, when you're looking at these land title deals that they're doing to give to the Indigenous, this is the type of thing that they're doing. They know it's unconstitutional, but they got the guys with guns, and people don't educate themselves. They hear a judge saying it, and they believe that this is okay. And this was because I went up and spoke about this, and they're doing this like crazy over and over again, right? This is the country that we're in. This happened 5 years ago, long before any of this stuff happened. And I can bring you 50 people that I know off the top of my head. They've had similar type of things like this happen. This is our justice system.
Chris?
Well, I mean, back to your original point, we need elected judges, right? I mean, I think the fewer bureaucrats, the fewer people who are compromised, the better. I mean, we should have an elected Senate. I mean, we need wholesale democratic reform in this country. Just no one's accountable. There's no accountability. And the public are blissfully ignorant for the most part. Either that or they're just unable to organize, or they're so busy, right? It's death by a thousand cuts. If you're constantly trying to make ends meet and take your kids to this and that, and, life has a way of becoming busy before you even know it. And the enemy can capitalize on that, right? I mean, it's like mass entertainment, right? Very few revolutions happen in populations that have television. So, right? It's like bread and circuses, to use the classic Roman example. And until people wake up from that and look out the window and go, what happened to my country? You're not going to have any change. And you have to hit a critical mass.
You're muted.
I like talking to myself sometimes, right? It's all good. When you look at Bill C9 and C8, when they start stealing your property in the same manner that they've done to me and other people, well, when you start speaking out or saying things, they're going to label you with hate speech. They're going to silence you. They're going to cut your telecommunications, or they can cut you off from the internet, cut your cell phone, you never get them back, right? People like who speak about this type of stuff where they're going on and you hurt people's feelings, they're going to put you up on hate speech. They don't even, they can make a bold-faced lie. When it comes from the court, people believe it because it's the court. Like you're watching some of the stuff that we're seeing with the character assassination, because people are of a certain position, people are going to believe them, right? And you can see where this is going. And political opponents, watch out, right? Because you say that you want to protect children, guess what? You just hate speech. You're done. But sorry, go ahead.
I want to say two things. First of all, to follow up with what Chris said, that we need elected, I believe he said judges, but we need elected judges, elected prosecutors, sheriffs, and the Senate. We need some means of either electing them or appointing them to the provinces. Now, this is a step in the right direction, but it's not a solution. Like, if you have a immoral, amoral society, you're going to get a dysfunctional government. Now, these elected positions that Chris is referring to and that they have in the U.S., it gives you a mechanism to course correct, to fix that problem. We don't have that mechanism. So Canada and America, we might be like more or less equally corrupted. They have a way of fixing that. They can kind of reverse the damage George Soros has done. We don't. So our mess is going to be a lot more difficult. The other thing I wanted to say is property rights. That is like the most, I think there's only two things that I find are foundational. One is a family unit. The other one is property rights. Like, you either own property or you are property. If I say that to somebody in Canada, they don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I might as well be citing Romulan philosophy. Like, it's alien to them, right?
Yes.
And that's another problem. And I think it's because it's been beaten out of the Canadian psyche over the last few decades. Bit by bit, small businesses have been wiped out. Private practice for medical industry has been wiped out. So now everyone's going to the hospitals. It's to the point where nobody owns a business. They rent their labor. Nobody owns a house. They rent their apartment, studio apartment. And it's really making it difficult to reverse that.
Now, I have an idea on how we might be able to reverse it. I know for a long time people have said, all this mass immigration, they're just trying to get voters. And there's a certain extent to that being true. I mean, my grandfather came here in late 40s, right? He was a refugee from the Soviet Union. And because the conservatives didn't want to let any of these German speakers into the country. And the liberals were like, yeah, come on in. He voted liberal almost every single election until the Harper era, right thereafter. It was guaranteed he was voting red because the conservatives didn't want him in the country. Now, there's an element of that, and I think the powers that be are relying on that being true. However, the populations that we're now bringing into our country are much more conservative on the whole, right? So I think movements on the right really need to resonate with those people. We need to try to reach them in their own communities, in their own languages if we have to. We need to find advocates in there. Because when I go back down to Abbotsford, where I grew up, the only people that I see on the street protesting against Soji are the Punjabi people. They'll be out there protesting against Soji. I'm like, I want them as my allies. I don't want to push them away, right? We have far more in common than we don't. And this whole racial division, this is a layer. This is something that the powers that be want to be an issue. And like, at the end of the day, we're all human. Like, we don't want to dilute our services with mass immigration. We don't want to dilute our debt. We don't want the fabric of our society being torn apart. But at the same time, like, let's ally ourselves on the things that matter the most. Things like protecting children, property rights, small business, etc.
It's funny that you actually mentioned that, because the MLA, the first MLA to actually take my concerns the most seriously and actually instructed while we were there his assistant to schedule an appointment for us to go back, was a brown guy. His last name was Singh, right? Like, and this is where you cannot use racial profiling to determine who somebody is. It's the contents of their heart. But with Dallas Brody, I wanted to circle back when they were talking about her being unstable and so forth, because they did the same thing. And BC has got a mental health act similar to Saskatchewan, which is extremely draconian, because if you know Dr. Mel Boucher, what they did to him, and I'm going to pull up kind of what they did to me, because they did a lot of the same language. This is what set alarm bells off, because if she goes out of line, people are going to try to come after her sideways. So this is what they use to try to silence with me. And the little red box there is the most important aspect, where she said that she tried talking to me, but I interrupted her and she didn't get the opportunity to speak. And so this is where they ended up strapping me to a bed. But it says here, I put this here, where people have to sit down and say that you have to be directed to go to get a mental health evaluation, which she didn't. And then she swears in that I refused the examination. This is where they can go with what they're saying, the language to her. So this here is explicitly torture. You lie to get somebody strapped to a bed and you drug them, that's torture. This is what they'll do to dissidents. And when I see them using that language against Dallas, saying that she's erratic and all that kind of stuff, this is what it brings to mind, because they use the same type of language. And when I was going into a court to go and try to assert my rights and protect other people, that's what happened. When I see them using that same type of language towards that woman, I have a very huge problem with that. Because if she goes to step up, they'll try to do something like that, like they did to Dr. Mel. And BC is notorious for that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a foreign example, but it's an example I know well, is that right after I left Australia in 2022, I started seeing videos coming out of police officers going to people's houses outside of Melbourne in the state of Victoria and giving them mental health checks, just showing up, making sure their mental health was okay. And, they're talking from the other side of the door, and they're filming this all using their Ring doorbell or whatever kind of security system they had. And, you got the sense that if they were to go outside that door, if they were to open it up to the police officer, that they were going to be arrested and taken away to some kind of psychiatric examination. So this is definitely a method that they are utilizing. They're testing it and slowly rolling it back out.
Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. You were going to say something, Peyman?
Yeah, I have to get going soon. It's kind of late here, but so the BC Mental Health Act, I've had Dr. Anna Silvestrovich on a couple of times, and we've talked about it. It's absolutely horrific, and it's terrifying. It's like National Socialist territory, terrifying. And I always say they lobotomized Dr. Mel Boucher. Like, he was never the same after he came out. But it's not the only way. I mean, and I find they try not to use the BC Mental Health Act on high-profile individuals, because it's kind of weird if you have this guy who is articulate and then they comes out in 2 weeks, he's like drooling. It's too obvious. If you remember with Maxime Bernier, they almost went after him for hate speech. I can't remember what it was, but he criticized something, and a First Nations lady came out and said, we've referred you. It was an MP. She said, we've referred you to the RCMP for potential hate speech. That has a chilling effect. I think that's how they will go after politicians, because if you can silence a politician, it's more scary than if you, lobotomize a politician.
No, but I'm saying if they arrest them and they put them into custody, having that painted picture, they can put them in for a psychiatric hold while they're in prison, where no one is around to see what's going on. You have to.
I understand what you're saying, Dale. And what I'm saying is, I think that's what they use for We the Lowly People. For Dallas Brody, they want to do it out of sight, out of mind, and they will use lawfare and the regulation, and they'll bankrupt her.
I agree with you to a point, but you have to remember, they're moving us from democracy to totalitarianism. This is their objective. Totalitarian regimes, they will use torture and they will kill their political enemies. And when you're looking at the fact that they're pushing maids in prison, Kelsey Sharon was blowing the whistle. Go watch the interview that she did with Alex Jones about this. They can go ahead and get any one of their political dissidents in this situation and push maid on them. we have to, I hope I'm wrong, but I have to look at it on a risk standpoint. Is it possible? Yes. How do we have to defend against something that is possible when I see people who have no compunction? They'll kill people for profit. They don't care. So I have to sit down and think, this is within the realm of possibility, because I don't know these people, and I don't trust them because they don't think like me.
I'm laughing because the next step, if we go more tyrannical, it'll be politicians' pagers start blowing up like in Israel.
But yes, well, I mean, speaking of that, look at the thread I did about AWS. Stephen Harper. Yes, the former director of CSIS, a former leader of the Joint Task Force 2, right, which is basically the Canadian equivalent of JSOC, a former leader of Unit 8200, which is like the stuff where they blow up those cell phones. That's what they do over there. And a former director of the Mossad, former director of MI5, former director of the CIA, and a former deputy of the FBI, and they're all working on AI stuff in a server here, building the AI stuff here in Alberta. That's who's doing it, and Stephen Harper's on the board. Tell me that you got a bunch of intelligence agencies from all over the world that are involved in doing the worst things, because the West were out pissing in everybody's cornflakes, starting more conflict than anybody else, coming together to do something here in Canada. I got a problem with that.
Chris?
Yeah, well, it's enemies foreign and domestic, isn't it? So that's the problem. We're fighting a global fight, right? It's a Canadian problem locally, and I mean, this thing with One BC and BC Conservatives, so many of these people are pawns. Who knows how many of them even know where their money is coming from or not coming from? It's more, am I playing into the globalist plan, or am I not playing into the globalist plan? That's the check that people should be using as a measure against their own decision making, right? If we all just did that and went, if I play this out to its logical conclusion, am I helping the globalists? Okay, maybe I shouldn't do it, right? If we can do that, we'll be further off ahead. But like Peyman, I need to leave shortly as well. But I did want to say that there was an X stream that Chris Erickson was part of that went live right when we went live. So people should go check it out after, and they may get some juicy tidbits about some insider kind of ONBC stuff there as well. So,
all right, no worries. I just want to play a video here. We can stop at a couple of it. I just want to show people some of the Canadian politicians and what they are involved in, so that, yes, we have players all over, but remember, locally, if we act locally, we can affect things globally. So let's look at some of our politicians and what they were involved in. I saw this today. I thought it was fitting.
In 2011, the law firm of Richmond, BC Liberal MP Joe Pescasolido made a Bear Trust joint venture deal for a company directed by Kwok Chung Tam, an alleged member of the Big Circle Boys, a powerful mainland China-based drug cartel, according to Canada Border Services Agency.
Now we learn, according to new reports, that the member for Richmond's law firm facilitated a secretive transaction that may have helped a drug cartel launder money through a Vancouver condo development.
Moving on for now, a Canadian member of Parliament of Indian origin has been accused of sexual harassment. Darshan Kang is a member of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party. A staffer who works in his constituency office in Calgary has accused him of sexual harassment.
Have you spoken to your MP, Mr. Kang, and why have you not removed him from caucus, given that you have taken that measure against other MPs who have faced similar allegations?
Another Liberal cabinet minister was called out today for breaking federal ethics rules by awarding 2 contracts to a friend she has known for nearly 20 years.
Let me be clear in saying once again that I made a mistake. My office contracted services from someone close to me, a friend, but because of our friendship, I should have recused myself from any and all dealings.
Rajvinder Singh Grewal is accused of failing to report millions of dollars in personal loans, Bev, to the ethics commissioner. Also, the Mounties are saying he solicited loans for his own benefit by using his public office, and also say that he administered his constituency office budget for his own benefit.
And a Liberal member of Parliament was caught without clothes during the virtual House of Commons today.
We've seen a member during question period improperly dressed, that is, unclothed.
Well, Rob, you're right. When Hunter Tutu left the cabinet and the caucus at the end of May, the public impression was left that this was entirely due to alcohol. But then a week ago, the Globe and Mail reported that Tutu was out because of an inappropriate relationship with a female political staffer.
Another Liberal, another apology.
I am very sorry.
The latest from Quebec MP Greg Fergus, found to have violated the Conflict of Interest Act.
Trudeau's former finance minister, Bill Morneau, was found to have violated the Conflict of Interest law after Dion determined We Charity founders Craig and Mark Kielburger were legally friends of Morneau's, and Morneau's actions were judged to have advanced their interests.
Canadians expect in a circumstance like this, when mistakes are made, that people accept those mistakes, own up to the mistakes. That's exactly what I'm doing.
But
I'm committing.
That was Minister Dominic LeBlanc's reaction to the ruling by Canada's ethics watchdog that he violated the Conflict of Interest law. Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion was investigating a lucrative Arctic Surf Clan license LeBlanc issued when he was Minister of Fisheries. The company he awarded that license to was linked to his wife's cousin, and Dion says the cousin stood to financially benefit from the grant.
An update now to a story Global News broke last week. Housing Minister Ahmed Hussein gave several federal contracts for political communications work to an agency that specializes in marketing food. And the agency's head is the sister of one of the minister's senior staff.
We'll cut that there, but you get the point. Doesn't matter what race they are, you have a ruling party, they're all finding the criminal element. That's the problem, right?
Like flies to the light.
Yes. So I understand everybody's got to wrap up here. So I just wanted to show that for people to understand this is our Canadian government. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with it on local levels, and every government, including the native governments, are corrupt like this. All of them, without exception. So let's get our closing thoughts before we wrap this up.
If anybody wants to follow me, you can catch me on X at Peyman Askari 451 on YouTube, Rumble, Substack. My podcast is in lay terms. If you want to come on, send me a message.
Awesome.
Yeah, same. On X, you can follow me at _Chris Enns, same spelling as below. And let's keep watching what happens in BC politics here. I hope it all works out for our benefit, but I think that it's going to be a long time coming.
All right, and thank you guys for coming. It was always good. I mean, I hope that this thing gets resolved, because we were seeing somewhat of and regardless of whatever you think of her, and I didn't agree with everything that she said, but the point was that something was being pushed. People were beginning to have the conversations that needed to be had, and we needed something different than what was the status quo. It seemed that she was a threat to the Uniparty, and she was going on things that were principled, which means you're not going to buy them, which is what we need, is more people on principle and less of these people that just one hand washes the other type mentality. So, I mean, give everybody a follow, share this, have the conversation, get as much information, and make the right decisions, and hold the government accountable. I'll close here with a prayer, because we can always use some prayer, because, I mean, looks like in Canada, we're going to need the intervention of God, because we don't have the mechanisms in the States that they do there. All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your grace and mercy. And Lord, I ask of you this day to help people to make more decisions and to start looking for the information for themselves, and to men and the women to work together to rebuild our families, our churches, our community, and our nation, so that we can have some protection for the children, that they don't grow up in this dumpster fire, is my prayer. In Jesus' name.